In today's podcast, we're going to be looking at the very important Declaration of Independence. Now, it was signed July 4th, 1776. That's considered the birth of our nation. And basically, it starts out the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have been connected with another, to assume the powers of the earth and separate the separate and equal station which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, and decent respect opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Basically, what it's stating there is that basically on the separation between the United States and the British Empire, because at the time they essentially were denying basic ideas of natural law. And the ideas of natural law were basically figured that these were equal to the ideas of natural law as would even be fit for natural law of sciences. And if they would denying people these basic rights were no different than denying that gravity did not exist. This would be the same absurd argument, and that's where these arguments come from. They go back to some of the ideas of St. Thomas Aquinas, the Catholic monk. And for those people who basically want to state that, as some of these progressive atheists that want to go against the idea of this and go, I hate Christianity and blah 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 blah, and want to go against this. Well, basically, all of your rights that you gained from this were actually from Catholicism itself. That's where it actually comes from. It doesn't come from these other things. When we look at the ideas of socialism and communism, you only gain privileges from the government. The government will take them away at any time. The government will tell you what you have the right to do and right not to do. They will, and these are only privileges from the government. The government will take them away at any time. What you gain here is actually from what we claim as either from God or from humanity, either way that you want to interpret it. And this does come from Catholicism itself. And when we go to the second paragraph, what's important with it, we will stop it at one important part is because this is very, very important on this, is we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these, mind you, that's very, very important, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mind you that it doesn't limit at these points, but those are the three that are actually listed as the three ones that are actually listed as the top of their listing. They're not actually listing that that's the end of it, but that's the start of these rights. Now, life as defined with it is actually defined as actually a life in the term of an adjective of meaning of or relating to an animate being. Now, this would essentially mean anything that would essentially have its own single DNA itself, and it's referring to life as in a human itself. And this would refer to basically would basically meaning that an unborn child would essentially mean that would essentially apply for life. You essentially cannot have your life taken from you. Liberty defines as the power to do as one pleases, and in one extent or freedom from physical restraint. Also freedom from an arbitrary or despotic control. The positive enjoy from various enjoyment of various social, political, or economic rights and privileges. The power to choose, the right or immunity enjoyed by prescription or grant. Permission to go freely within specified limits. This is the idea of liberty. It basically means to actually be free. Now, when they define liberty, is as the idea of freedom. Basically, with liberty comes responsibilities. It doesn't mean necessarily a libertine society. Libertine is a completely different idea. This means you actually have to take responsibility for your own actions. If you do something stupid, you're going to have to take responsibility for what you did stupid. Now we have pursuit of happiness. Now for this thing, we need to define what pursuit is. The act of pursuing, or an activity that one engages in as vocation, profession, or activation. Now essentially we need to look up what pursuing is. Pursuing is defined as to follow or to follow in order, to take or overtake, capture, kill, or defeat. No, it's not that. To find or employ measures to obtain or accomplish. That would mean exactly what we're talking about here. To find or employ measures to obtain or accomplish. This would be the same idea as to pursue or go. Is the same idea with this. Then when we look at happiness, it would be a state of well-being or contentment, as also known as joy. And that would be the whole thing with it. Is the pursuit of happiness is only basically the right to essentially employ measures to accomplish the act of basically well-being and contentment. That's it. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed well-being and contentment. It means you have the right to actually find it, no matter what way this means. The actual government itself, government or no person can actually restrict this thing, no matter what it may be. And it doesn't mean they cannot essentially restrict it, nor actually tell you that but they cannot. You cannot request any actual physical object or physical money or any type of physical benefits from the government for this. This doesn't mean you can actually ask for something. This is the major key. Now when we go into the next part, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. This is another key point. Is that the government themselves does not have any power without the consent of the governed. This means if the people do not consent, the government does not have any power. This is one of the major points. This would mean that that the idea of that the nation must remain whole and states do not have rights to secede, or states do not have the rights to implement their own laws above federal jurisdiction does not exist, should never be considered. This means such laws that are essentially trying to overtake any type of overreach, such as any type of healthcare laws, any type of thing that's overtaking the economy, any type of thing that's essentially overtaking the rights of the states or the individuals to make their own freedom of choice. Going back to the idea of liberty, anything that takes over that, where they can't make their own freedom to actually choose their own personal decisions, anything that that basically causes them to have to do anything under compulsory response, is actually essentially does not go under the consent of the governed, because they did not consent to any of those activities. Thus, essentially, that's why we have certain things that's why we actually have a Second Amendment, as you'll see later, and that's the reason why is to actually overthrow the government when they become that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to an end, to these ends, the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers into such forms as to them shall seem most likely to affect the safety and the happiness. As stated right there, essentially, this is why we had the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is not supposed to be limited because it's meant to actually overthrow the government when they become oppressive, when they're not respecting the actual rights of the individuals. The moment they do that, this is when they start actually stealing the actual money of the people. This is when they're actually disobeying the rights, when they're actually spying on the actual people. They're not respecting the ideas of privacy, and they're disobeying the actual Constitution. When we see this happening, as we have been for quite some time, this is why we have the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment is not supposed to be abridged. The 1938 Firearms Act is not constitutional. It needs to be overturned. Anything the military can actually buy, the actual citizens are supposed to be able to buy, because they're supposed to be able to go after the government with the same force as the government is supposed to go after any type of enemy. And this is the whole point. We're supposed to be able to have anything the government has. You got to understand, back then the most powerful weapon when this was established were cannons, and you had individuals owning cannons as well, and that was the whole point. And you could easily, and that was so they could defeat any type of tyrannical government. And that was the whole point of this whole idea of government, so government doesn't become tyrannical. With the moment that people cannot defend against a tyrannical government, it's when government is easily able to be tyrannical itself. It says prejudice indeed will dictate the governments long established should not change for light and transient causes, according to all shall have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by invariable by abolishing what they're accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariable the same objects devices are designed to reduce them under the absolute despotism of in the right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their foreign systems of government. And this is basically saying exactly what I've been reiterating, and what they did back then is essentially what we're almost at the point of now with it. Now, we shouldn't alter the actual Constitution itself, like what people have stated with some of the Article 5. I mean, I will get to the Article 5 thing later on down the road. That's absurd, because if people won't follow the Constitution, that's not the problem. That's an Article 5 solution will not solve the problem. It's the actual people there, and basically we need actually people out here that can actually get this, they're actually willing to get it done, and actually willing to establish this, because I mean, we don't need our we need an actual system that's actually reestablished, and we need something that's basically set up originally as it was constitutionally. And this means essentially is starting to declare basically ownership of the government ourselves. And that would mean essentially stating we own the government, and stating that stating basically essentially stating that the wars are over. We're not going to pay for them. We're not going to pay for foreign aid. We're not going to pay for public aid anymore. And basically take this stuff over and essentially declare the as states, we're going to declare all of these laws unconstitutional. And essentially, because these places are these units are located in these states, immediately shut these servers down and all these like spying places, and immediately delete all information on these places, and essentially replace them basically just, or essentially go in there and order all of our troops home and start essentially a government where we bring our people back and we have our military on U.S. soil, and basically end the idea of other countries dictating our policy, and actually go, because the fact is we don't worry about other nations. And if you look at the actual Declaration of Independence, we're not currently an independent nation anymore. We're essentially doing the bidding of we've been doing the bidding of the UN, which controls NATO and the Atlantic Council. We've been doing the bidding of these, and then of these other major lobbyist groups such as AIPAC and CARE that have actually been doing all of this stuff down in Washington, D.C., and they're essentially controlling the way we act, and that's not an independent country. And the states need to basically say, we're done with this, and we're not going to take it anymore. And then when you have the Open Society is also another one that's actually influencing our country, and they're not allowing us to act as an independent nation. Each country is its own independent nation and needs to be treated as such. You don't need these countries actually doing this. And when it comes to even just immigration, you should basically have it to where the people aren't bound to a nation by its immigration laws. Essentially, that's currently what we are. Not only are we actually kind of messed up with our immigration system, we also have a system to where we're actually binding our people to our actual country. If you look at it, a lot of people don't want to talk about that issue. We're actually binding our people to our country because we want money, because we need to pay for all of these social programs. And that's the whole issue that we need to look at. And when we look at the whole thing is we're binding our people to our country, and that doesn't help us out at all. We don't allow our people to leave for more than 3 months without them coming right back. And that's the whole point. We're binding them to the state. And a free people should be able to run and leave wherever they want to go. And that's the whole point. And if we're talking about liberty should be liberty itself. And this is not a liberty-based system. It's basically, let's squeeze as much money out of people as possible. And we've totally negated the whole idea that we were actually founded upon. If we're going to be founded upon life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we've totally forgotten all of that. We're basically about public aid, foreign aid lobbyists, and bombing a bunch of people. and that's what our basically what our whole system's about, and that's what our system has been about for the last 100+ years. And if we really actually want to actually do something about it, we need to actually radically change what we've done and start unwinding all of this garbage. Now, if you like this, subscribe, click the notification bell, share this on social media, and I will see you guys later today for my nightly live stream, and I'll figure out something to do on that for the topic unless anybody suggests something. I haven't had any suggestions yet, so I'll probably just go off of whatever comes to mind. And bye, everyone.